important part of the club is the evaluation. In fact, I get lots of phone calls about, looking for clubs, and I usually tell them, don't necessarily go to the first and join the first club you belong to. You go and visit. Oh, okay, that's good. Well, maybe there's something that meets your particular needs better. But when you're evaluating the quality of the club that will meet your needs, don't look for the club with the best speakers. Look for the club with the best evaluators, because they're the ones that will help you to become better and better speaker. And who better than the person that is going to conduct this event later on, to conduct an event on evaluation, then, in my mind, History 12's expert, professional on evaluation, another qualified speaker, and a District 12 evaluation contest winner, Dominique Fruchtman. Dominique?
Hi, everybody in Zoom land, and hello, people who braved the drive and the walk from that parking lot. My name is Dominique Fruchtman, and I am a District 12 evaluation champion. And evaluations have been and always will be my favorite part of any Toastmasters meeting. I believe evaluations are the heart and soul of improving. How can you improve if you don't hear the truth? And I don't believe in brutal honesty. I think there's brutality and there's honesty. And if you're tactful and kind and loving in your evaluations, you can help improve people without having to be blunt or mean. There's nothing worse than a harsh evaluation. My goal tonight is going to be to address a couple of things. First, how to evaluate very new speakers, because sometimes there's so much going on wrong that you think, where do I even start? How do I not discourage them from coming back? Well, there are a couple tricks that I have as a suggestion. Another thing I want to talk about is how to evaluate advanced speakers, very advanced speakers, because so often there's so little that you can find to suggest for improvement. The person's got charisma, they're polished, you like what they have to say. What can you say to make it better? Well, I have some ideas there too. Do we have those handouts, Tom?
They should be back. Make sure everybody has it.
Did everybody get? Oh, good. Let me grab one. Thank you.
Hold that up.
Okay. You were emailed, hopefully, this.
I emailed them out here.
Okay, great. This list of suggestions for improvement in some areas that you might not think of right off the bat. One of my favorite areas to suggest for improvement in an advanced speaker is the title. Sometimes the title doesn't match the content. And even though it's a small thing, it's still important that a title match the speech, the goal, and the situation. For example, tonight, I'm guilty of this right here. Missing attention getter. I could have started with some real wow story, and I didn't. That would be something I would suggest for improving for myself tonight. And at least I have established credibility, which is 2 up from there, because Tom talked me up, and I'm a contest winner. Yay. And I made this beautiful sheet for your reference. One of the things that is most useful when you are evaluating an advanced speaker is to think about things they did well, which is often quite easy in an advanced speaker, but things they could improve. And it's not often what they do wrong. For example, in a beginning speaker, they might jiggle the change in their pockets or look down or use notes or all of that. No eye contact, no smiling. And you think, okay, none of that's happening with this advanced speaker. What can I give them? what you can give them is missed opportunities. Like my missed opportunity in charging out here with a big attention getter. So think in terms of what could have been added as opposed to what I saw that went horribly wrong. Because when we look at speakers as evaluators, oftentimes we're seeing, okay, I don't like this. I wish he didn't do that. And it's what was done that should not have been done, like looking down, like using notes, and not what was missing. What's missing? Think of Swiss cheese and filling the holes. For example, if you're using a prop, I had this happen to I was in a Zoom meeting with Lebanon, and the woman was talking about how inflation was there. She's, you think your inflation's bad. Our inflation is crazy. Our Toastmasters club used to cost this much money, and she found out some bills. And then she said, now it costs this much money, and there were 4 times as many. And then she just put them back in her pocket. And I couldn't help thinking how much more effective it would have been, especially since it was on Zoom in her bedroom, if she had just taken the money and hurled it up in the air like it was nothing and let it float down. Because she actually talked about throwing money away. And it was missed. And in my evaluation, I mentioned to her, this was a missed opportunity. Sometimes we see missed opportunities for humor. So when it comes to advanced speakers, think to yourself, what would I like to see? Sometimes more of a smile can make someone look younger, prettier, handsomer, like they're actually having fun doing whatever they're doing, but also makes them less nervous, makes us less nervous. For a very beginning speaker, I had a woman recently tell me she was so scared, her palms were sweating and her mouth was dry and her knees were quivering. And I said, you know, that sounds like excitement to me. If you tell your brain, I'm not scared, I'm excited, you can trick yourself into getting rid of that fear and in a quivering voice say, I'm so not afraid, excited to be here. And you can fake excitement, even though it's fear. You can pretend it's excitement and no one will question you. The symptoms are the same. If you ever have a beginning speaker who's terrified, who thinks they're going to faint or throw up, remind them that fear and excitement are so similar physically, physiologically, that we can trick our bodies. Just lie to yourself and say, I am not scared, I am excited. This knot in my stomach is anticipation and excitement, not butterflies ready to carry me away. When it comes to very beginning speakers, first time icebreaker Toastmasters, they've been in the club 3 weeks, maybe a month, and it's time to evaluate. How do we do that? It's not as hard as it sounds, although some people have asked me, how do I do this kindly? How do I do this effectively? Let's say that I write down 17 things that they could improve, because that's how many I would notice. I'll list them all, but I'll only tell them 2. The 2 that I think they could conquer the easiest. If they don't have a good memory, if they're nervous and they're using notes, I'm not going to mention the notes. I'll mention eye contact, smiling, and finding the fun, following the fun. If you're passionate about what you're talking about, it will come out in your speech. And encouraging, telling them, even if it was the worst speech you've ever seen, telling them, I applaud your courage to come up there and stand there silently for 30 seconds for the first half minute of your speech while you were just trying to find your voice. Applauding courage. giving them maybe two small things to work on. And then if you think they can take it, or you know them well, or you're the one who invited them to the club, you can say to them afterwards, I have a list. I have a dozen more items. Do you want to hear them, or do you want me to tell you in 6 months? See what they say. Me, even as a first timer, I'll be encouraged and I'll say, lay it on me, give it to me. I'm bracing myself. Give it all to me. And then I can pick and choose what I want to work on in what order and think, oh, I can stop doing that. I can stop wearing shiny objects that glare and reflect and distract. There, done. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Or jangly bracelets, or big loopy earrings, or your hair is in your face. We can't see your pretty face. So easy. A hair bunchy. Lose the bracelets. Boom, boom, 2 down. What else you got? So making that big list is good. Telling them privately the other 15 things that you didn't tell them in front of the club. And remembering to find as much as you can good without picking on content too much. I'm one of those evaluators who has a strong belief that content is irrelevant. Content varies. If I get a job and my boss says, give us a sales report next week and make it not boring. Oh, okay. Well, that's not my choice, the topic. But if I come and practice it at a Toastmasters meeting, I want that evaluation that says, you stood there in the fig leaf position or the bridesmaid position. This is my favorite because it looks like you're walking down the aisle holding a bouquet of flowers. Or you cross your arms and you look defensive, or you put your hands in your pocket. And despite how it feels, standing with just your hands like this feels so ridiculous and looks so good. And anybody who's ever been in a play or done any theater will tell you it takes some getting used to. Even that was a crutch. I don't need that. Those are my notes. I took notes on Richards and Michael's Tall Tales. Yeah, I evaluated you guys. You better believe it. You'll get it a little later. Anyway, I don't need that. Thank you, Suzanne. What we're going to do tonight is have 2 speakers, and we're going to have a couple of high-level evaluators evaluate them. And we're going to see how those evaluations go. Unlike a contest where we would segregate people, we will use the honor system tonight. And I will say, if you hear something that someone said that you're about to say, you say it anyway. Don't not say it because it's already been heard. But don't steal either. And our evaluators tonight will be Richard Snyder and Wilson, and you, Tom, and me, and David Flores. Okay, David. Hi, David. Thank you. I think I remember you from D100, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, good. Anyway. Oh, that's fantastic. So we've got a lot of district champions here tonight. We've got 2 speeches to hear, and I'd like to move on with that unless there are any questions I can answer about evaluations in general right now. Anybody live have anything to ask? Any burning, you know it all, you got it all figured out? Then tell me, because I could use a couple extra hints.
No,
Does anyone have any questions online? If you do, can you please put them in the chat for our tech person? And while that's happening, I'm going to find your intro.
am I timing the speakers?
Yes, please, 5 to 7 minutes. And if we could pin Marilyn somewhere, that would, yes. A question, what is it?
How would you, or how would be the best way to sandwich the
The evaluation?
yeah,
Any evaluation?
yeah.
Oh, great question. How do you sandwich the evaluation? You start out with, here, let me borrow this back. I will demo that by doing my evaluation of Richard's speech for about a minute or so. Richard, I did not know you were so funny. I have seen you do humorous speeches before, but this one, the subtlety and the visual images you gave brought you to a new level of funny for me. Your stock went up tonight, my friend. You had a good hook, some hilarious props, and I was laughing within 15 seconds of you starting. So that's how you would grab, that's an excited wow, wow, wow to start out. Then I like to say, if you were to deliver this speech again, and I think that phrase is so important because what it means is you didn't do anything wrong tonight. It isn't, here's what you did that sucked. It's, here's my two favorite words, next time. Next time. Let's assume Richard's going to give this again. And next time, here's what I'd like to see. How many of you, he started out, well, Richard, I don't know, we're not counting. How about instead of how many of you, raise your hand if you remember Dragnet. And therefore, not having me to think, well, I don't know, I'm going to look behind me and see how many of us, because I'm going to take you at your word. Some small improvement like that. When you said policemen, all I could think was, I was a police cadet wanting to be a police officer in 1982. So be careful. Maybe police officers pouring out of the car in the 80s. Not unheard of, right? Let's not say policemen. Just a little throw Dom a bone. And finally, if you're going to read your speech, invest in something called a center camera, which attaches to your video and ends you up right dead center in the middle of your screen. So you are looking, you can look at the words while looking at the camera. Great little tech trick, because I could swear that your eyes were not on the camera, which made me think you might have been consulting notes. It's okay. It's perfectly acceptable, especially in a speech of this duration. But those three things. Overall, though, I got to tell you, this was one of the best tall tales I've seen. So visual. I was right there with you. Your beard kept falling off and you kept putting it back, and that was a riot. I was trying to figure out if that was an electronic beard or a physical beard, and I decided it was really there. You really had that. And you looked like an old hippie, man. You had me. So I love this. I can't wait to see it again. And I wish you luck in tonight's contest. And that's how I would sandwich an evaluation. Start out with a bang, a couple of things that you loved, that you felt. If you were to deliver this again, I'd like to see this, and why. And why? Not just police officers instead of policemen, but because I was almost a policeman. And I don't want to be a policeman. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, excellent. Any other questions from the peanut gallery? No? Okay,
I have one,
you do.
because I've seen evaluators do this where if they are saying you could have done this, whatever that thing is, whether it's a facial expression or a movement that they demonstrated. So I thought maybe for the benefit of the audience, you could give us one of those.
Yes, absolutely. You stayed in one spot too much. You favored the center of the stage instead of walking from one side to the other. The trick to that is, here's what I like to do. I like to use eyes. So what was your name, sir?
Joe.
Joe. So I'm going to pretend I'm fishing. And I take my fishing pole and I reach over to Joe and I hooked you right on your, can you feel it? Right on your lapel. And now I'm going to reel myself over there. And I'm looking at you and I'm looking at you and I'm looking at you and I'm talking to you and baby Jeremiah too. And I'm going to use up this side of the audience. I'm going to try to see what color eyes you have, that pattern on Jeremiah's shirt, his nice clean glasses, the way he parted his hair. And then I'm going to count how many people are back there. Is that 3 bodies or 4? I can't tell. 4 bodies. And while I'm doing this silently in my head, I've moved over here and I've used up this half of the audience. Oh, but now I have a different point to make. So I'm going to hook you and I'm going to reel myself over. Instead of reeling in the fish, you're reeling in yourself. And now I'm going to focus on this portion of the audience. And I'm going to try to look at your eyes and your eyes and your eyes and your eyes of all those invisible people. And after you see the color of 3 people's eyes about that, you can move on. And I can look at Connie and go, oh, Connie, I'm going to reel myself over here and use up this part of the audience. Boom, 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 boom. Another technique I've seen is if somebody's telling a story chronologically about their, we'll go here, left to right. Your left to right. In Lebanon, they did it right to left. My childhood, my college years, my retirement. People read left to right. And if you're going to tell a chronological story, you can start on the left side, like the beginning of a sentence. And as your chronology of your story moves on, so does your body. It's subconscious, but you should try it sometime. It's fun. It gives you a purpose, moving with purpose. Those some good examples? Okay. Any other questions? All right, then, without further ado, Morris, give me a moment to read all about you. Morris serves in the Army Reserves as a drill sergeant candidate with plans to attend the Drill Sergeant Academy this month. Having just left his 15-and-a-half-year employment with KPC Health, finishing as a systems analyst, Morris is transitioning to leadership and team development and training. Having heard Patrick Lencioni through the Maxwell leadership team, Morris discovered the book, The 6 Types of Working Genius. Tonight, Morris will tell us how Mr. Lencioni's book can make a difference in your teams. Please help me welcome Morris Anderson IV. Work in your genius. Work in your genius. Morris Anderson IV.
I was in a car with Mike. Mike is one of the well-respected clinical analysts from Altera Health. I worked with him for about 2 years. In the car, we were heading to lunch, and we were in a rush. The restaurant was there on the left-hand side of the road, just past the light. Mike, in his normal fashion, asked me, Morris, what would happen if we took a left at the light to get to the restaurant instead of going straight ahead? Toastmasters, Speakers Bureau. Have you been in a meeting where somebody asks all the questions and it feels like it will never end? That was Mike for me. Mike asked every single question he could ponder in his head. He was always way up here while I was down here trying to get the work done. As you just heard, I was in the car trying to get us to lunch. Upon discovering Mr. Lencioni's book, The 6 Types of Working Genius, I finally learned to value Mike. I have to tell you about this journey. When I first heard about the 6 Types of Working Genius, I was so puzzled. What is this new assessment about? Have you taken DISC or the Myers-Briggs, those personality assessments? This is a new one that doesn't assess for personality or behavioral traits. It's in a design called WIDGET, WIDGET. It attempts to categorize you by how you best fit on a team. I was so enthralled in this book. I couldn't believe that it was a page turner, short read. However, the story of how the 6 types of working genius came to be, I loved it. As I turned from page to page, I discovered my working geniuses. We all have 2. The working geniuses are divided into 3 phases. The first being implementation, the second, activation, and the third, implementation. These are very important. The W and the I, wonder and invention. Doesn't that sound spectacular? The genius of wonder and the genius of invention. These ideas that form in our head, with the genius of wonder and the genius of invention, those are the collaborators that take those ideas and turn them into something concrete that must be worked upon like a project almost. It's the very start of a project. Next, activation. We have our discerners and our galvanizers. The discerners look at the ideas that came from our inventor and our wonderer and decide if they're good or if they're not good. They reject or they approve and say, this is going to work for us. I'm a discerner. Discernment is my favorite. I said we have 2. I'll reveal my second one shortly. But discernment is such a powerful element, and it's my favorite place to be. My coworkers learned early on that if they brought something to me, I would happily review it and give them the best of my opinion after a thorough analysis. I've even had people send me their resumes. It's like that skill everyone was already recognizing, and this book just helped to paint it out for me. Last phase is implementation. That is our enabler and our tenacity. The enablers take that project and they say, let's get it done. And this is how we're going to start. And the person with tenacity, they're the finisher. No matter what's happening, this person with tenacity said, I'm working on this last piece of this project, and then I can help you with whatever you want. Beautiful picture. We have 6 categories, and each of us have 2 geniuses. What about the rest of the 6 for us? What are they? 2 are your competencies, places where you can live and you're competent, however, they're not your favorite place to be. They actually will drain you of a little bit of energy. The last 2 are your frustrations, the place where you do not want to be at all. Guess what my frustrations are? The genius of wonder and the genius of invention. I always ask myself on long meetings, why do I hate meetings so much? And those people who ask all of those questions, that drive me nuts. It's because the genius of wonder is a frustration for me. And the longer I have to live in that area, the less energy I'll have to do anything else. And I promise you, it is real. After I finish a long meeting, I'm done for the day. I don't want to do anything else. I don't even want to discern. Let's get back to Mike. What do you think Mike's genius is? One of them. Wonder. Genius of wonder. My favorite. Yes, Mike has the genius of wonder. And in those meetings, what I didn't realize is it was a genius. Mike's questions were so crucial to what we were doing. If Mike wasn't asking the question, nobody was paying attention to that element. It hit us by surprise every time we didn't pay attention to Mike. My second genius is enablement. I love to be able to enable. That means that I like to work at the ground level. I discern, and then enablement means I'm going to get my hands on it and help you get this started, correct? I don't like the high level thinking. Don't give me an idea. I don't want to invent anything, but once you do that part for me, bring it here for me, because then I can take it and make it happen for you. Just not finish it. come back with me to the car. Here I am with Mike, and we're driving straight through the light because, of course, yeah, okay, Mike, what if we took a left? The restaurant's up here at Court on the left. I got into the left lane, and I waited about 5 minutes before I could make a left through oncoming traffic. What was Mike's question? What would happen if we took a left at the light? If I had taken a left at the light, we would have gone across the back and straight into the parking lot and gotten to lunch 5 minutes sooner. Madam Toastmaster.
Fantastic. Thank you, Morris. In the interest of breaking things up, I'm going to do the evaluations immediately after the speech. So we'll do speech evaluation and then speech evaluation. Gentlemen, David and Richard and Tom, this gives you a couple of minutes to wrap up your evaluations while I give mine. Morris, wow. You know, I don't think I've ever seen you actually get up and speak in a club or a situation. You're such a strong leader. And I do believe leaders do need to know how to speak, but you don't have to be one or the other. You just proved that you are the whole package. Congratulations. I love your passion and your enthusiasm and excitement. It was infectious. I loved when you turned the pages of the book. I don't think of self-help books as page turners. So I believe you when you say this one is. And a short read, you got my attention. You gave us the three, when you gave us those three, wonder, invention, implementation, I had a structure I was ready to follow, and I wrote those down. If you were to do this again, here's what I'd like to see. You're a good-looking guy, and you're dressed sharp, but there's some stuff in your pockets. And I would like to see that smooth line. So remember, next time, take the phone, wallet, whatever small suitcase you might have going on in that pocket, and check those bags with your partner, and you will look just sleek. The wallet bulge was just distracting me. Also, maybe start with invent what happened in the car. Michael Osier, one of my favorite people on the planet, once told me never to let the truth get in the way of a good story. Now, I know what he meant. He didn't mean lie. He didn't mean do a tall tale. What he meant was, you can massage things. If you started, I was driving along, and my friend, what was his name? Mike. Mike said, Morris, and I said, and I felt my hands tensing on the steering wheel. Yes, Mike. What would happen if you start out with that story and then circle back to it later? You got us hooked because we're seeing you burning up and the steering wheel shaking with your frustration. I think that was possibly a missed opportunity. And you're such a good speaker. I'm going to suggest you juggle things around so that we can't wait to get back to see how that story ends. Leave us hanging, leave us on a cliffhanger, then tell us everything, then come back. Overall, though, this was such a fun, passionate speech. You know, I'm going to hop on Audible later and buy my copy of it and listen up, and I'll let you know what I think. And I can't wait to hear you give this again. And then I would. Now, in the interest of live, Tom, can I call you up to do the next eval? Okay, come on over.
Bring my notes along.
Bring your notes.
Yep.
Okay,
Thank you.
Tom Jamenson.
And thank you, Laura. And she said, I don't remember you coming in. We have an excitement and energy. So maybe that's a good thing as a leader. You can come in there because if there was one thing I think specifically that I personally got out of the whole experience was an enhanced likelihood of following you as a leader. Because you get that self-confidence, you get that energy and excitement that you brought to the stage. The appearance is great, but in terms of inspiring me to be a following of your ideas, it's that energy, that enthusiasm, that excitement you had about this particular story. On the other side of that same coin, I didn't really feel that I could concisely write down what your call to action was. My experience of that action would be, what I would learn from the speech is the importance of more questions being answered. That was kind of part of the humor, but it was also a lesson of it, because you did say positive things about the fact that you kept asking questions. One comment on gestures, and I'm terrible about this myself, and that is you might not use some contracting because you're always up there, you're always doing something, and many of them were very effective. I wanted to say that one of the most high point of the whole thing, believe it or not, in terms of acting as a professional, to come here as though you really had control of the stage, is when you came up, you didn't say anything. You waited until you had the attention of the audience, and you gave it to them at a solid presentation. I was saying oftentimes when I do evaluation for speakers that the important moments in every speech are when you're not talking. The longer the pause after your point that you're trying to make, the more important that topic, that point was. And so, for instance, Michael Alexander and I, and many others, to come from the debate club, and we were really trying to make a point sink into the audience, but make that point strongly with a great deal of confidence, and let that settle in. Because usually you can talk fast and the people really can comprehend. So you did bring that excitement that to the audience, lots of effective gestures, but not like you can see what all I time. So
That's why I want to
excellent
this.
appearance,
Okay, well,
excellent vocal variety, excellent range. Maybe there would have been a time you could have figured out to lower the excitement level down so that it accentuates the excitement later. So maybe so you have a little bit of a roller coaster where you're really excited about something, and this is important, and then is there a moment when you have to think about whether this is a good idea? Is this guy really going to have a better impact on my life? So and then you come back to what your excitement. So I love the vocal variety, the appearance, the energy, the excitement, and many of the gestures. I do the same thing when I'm not ever lifting up my hand for the fact. Relaxed, it brings more emphasis to it. Excellent job. And I'm really impressed.
All right. That was a great evaluation, Tom. Woo. You're extremely observant. I loved that you pointed out that there was a missing call to action and the peaks and valleys. So important to remember. Thank you for that. That was outstanding. Now let's see. Can we hear from David Flores? David, are you up? Are you ready, my friend?
I certainly can step in now. Thank you very much. And Morris, it's a pleasure to watch you speak this evening. I felt some strong points that you have as a speaker was obviously your strong voice. You project yourself well. You utilize gestures along with your speech pattern that came off smooth. Also, your eye contact seemed to be looking at everybody in the audience where you work the stage back and forth. So that was excellent job on your part. The storytelling was interesting in a sense, and I don't really look too much into the content. I really like to concentrate on the delivery of what's being said. And in this case, I felt there's a couple of things I would have hopefully maybe seen done differently from my perspective. Doesn't necessarily make a better speech, but maybe a different way of presenting the information. A little more vocal variety, and the pace seemed a bit fast. I think there was opportunities for you to have some larger pauses in there, especially on the words that you utilized as far as the wanderer, the invention. Emphasize those words in a more direct manner, the wanderer, and give it some deep thought to it and pause on that word. Then you go to the other side of the audience and say the invention of the inventor. So emphasize those factors that you were talking about when you're telling your story throughout that presentation. When you opened, it was an interesting opening regarding turning left or going straight. And I was kind of curious what that was leading into with regards to this particular book that you were talking about that you read. But it was interesting how you brought it along at the very end. The thing that I felt at the end, though, is when you were talking about the decision you made of turning left or going straight. Again, slow that down so people can get the emphasis of what it is when you talk about it in the beginning and at the end. At the end, when you closed, it seemed a bit abrupt, almost like you're rushing to finish this presentation. So I turned left, I could have saved 5 minutes, as opposed to going straight and going on the back. Try to be a little more slower on your pace and emphasizing certain words that you want people to remember in particular in that speech. So overall, I thought you did a fine job of presentation, very interesting presentation. I enjoyed every bit of it. I think this is other items you can maybe want to consider to maybe look at a different way of presenting it. But my two major factors, I feel like, were just vocal pace, a little slower, more pauses. Overall, I thought you did an excellent job in this presentation. Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, David. David, I loved how you focused on delivery and pauses. That is such an excellent point to make, and something that I frequently forget. And thank you for taking the advice on the advanced speaker of what was missing. And what we're missing might have been slowing down, letting us absorb that like a sponge. I always think of a dry sponge under a sink. If you turn it on, a faucet on high, the water goes everywhere and the sponge doesn't absorb a thing. But if you turn that on a drip and let that sponge absorb, you got yourself a wet sponge. And what we want is an audience of wet sponges. And with that, we'll go to Richard Snyder. Are you ready, Richard? Yeah, good. Excellent. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and especially Morris. Morris, thank you for educating us tonight. We all learned a little bit more different types of geniuses, 6 types of geniuses. As I was listening to your speech, I enjoyed the way you used the stage. You didn't stay in one place. I also liked your gestures and your eye contact used throughout your speech. I also really liked the way you came back to Mike. Sometimes a speaker opens with a point and they don't bring us back. So I really like the way you enveloped your speech with Mike toward the beginning of a speech, and you brought us back. And you didn't make yourself the hero. It would have been easy to say, I would have followed his advice and I would have lost time. So I think that was good. Lance Miller's also mentioned that. Make other people the hero of your speech. A couple of suggestions for improvement. 6 points is a lot. I was trying to write them down. You might give us mnemonics or remind us at the beginning and again at the end what those 6 points are for those of us who are anal about writing down all the points. It just reminds us, recap at the end. You moved around well throughout your speech, but a couple times, I think the lighting and you were wearing a dark suit, you were kind of lost in the background. So be very careful in being aware of your background, because your dark suit, you melded in with the background at certain points. And find 1 or 2 more points. When there's a speech, I like to hear about a book. Who wrote the book? Hold the book up if you have it, and certainly remind us a couple times who wrote the book. I really enjoyed your speech. I learned. I'm not sure what my genius is. I've got to work on those. I look forward to reading the book. The end, I would throw it back to the audience. What are your geniuses? Throw it back to the audience and ask the audience, what are your geniuses? Are you the type that initiate? Are you a wonder type? So I would have thrown it back to the audience and get their input, or at least make them think, yeah, I've got to read the book to find out about myself. Well done. I look forward to your next speech. Madam Toastmaster.
6 types of working genius.
The six types of working genius is the name of the book, and it's written by Patrick Lencioni. Okay, so I almost said his name right.
If that's how I think.
Richard, you had some great points. I love the idea of mnemonics, of holding the book up and of asking the audience, what are your geniuses? You know what you're doing when you're asking that, it gives me chills. You're telling the audience they're geniuses. You're just saying, what kind are you? Which one are you? I'm curious. Well, the only way you're going to find out is read the book and get back to me. So you're pushing the book as well, which I love. I could see this as a longer speech that you could give to Kiwanis clubs, right, Tom? and Rotary clubs, that you could expand this, make it a little longer, and really help other people figure out what their geniuses are. Nicely done, Richard. Fantastic. That's everybody, right? It's all of us. Okay. Our next speaker has been a Toastmaster for over 10 years. Uniquely joined Toastmasters in an effort to go from good to great. He was already a good speaker, and he joined Toastmasters to be better, as opposed to someone who is riddled with fear. This fearless man is going to do a speech called "To the Tune of That Little Voice." And I welcome Brian Rowley to the stage.
I'm going to need all of the participants who are on Zoom to turn on your cameras so I can see your raised hand. My speech is about that little voice. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm going to give it a bit of a description so you can get a handle on what I'm referring to. And then I'm going to ask you a question. That little voice is the little kind of inkling you have, I'll call it. It's more than gut feeling, it's more than intuition. It's more like everything you know, augmented by a bit of spiritual guidance. So now that you have an idea of what that little voice means, and I do sometimes use the acronym TLV. So if I say TLV, just realize that little voice and TLV are the same thing. How many people know what I'm talking about when I say that little voice? That's most of this audience, and I can't see behind me. So how many people in Zoom can raise their hand and say, you know what I'm talking about when I say that little voice? Okay, I'm going to say I've got about half the people, which is great. Then I get to enlighten the other half. I'm going to tell you a couple of stories, and in the end, I'm going to have a little challenge I'm going to throw down for you. I'm sitting in my office one day, signing checks. You can now deposit your checks. I'm an IT guy. You can deposit your checks with your cell phone. All you have to do is write something on the back, take a picture of the front, take a picture of the back, press a couple of buttons, and magically the money appears in your account. However, I was writing for deposit only, and I had a stack of checks to deposit. So it took me a little while for me to get tired of writing those same 3 words, and I thought, yeah, you know, the for deposit only, there must be a stamp. There must be some way I could just stamp this and have it say for deposit only. And then, without warning, that little voice came up and said, have you seen what a nice day it is outside? And that little voice said, don't you think they would have a rubber stamp, maybe at Office Depot, that you could get to solve your problem of getting tired of writing those 3 little words on the backs of these checks? And the little voice said, what are you doing? Why are you still in this office? It's dark. It's kind of gloomy. And look outside. Isn't it a beautiful day? Don't you need some fresh air? Why don't we just take a trip? And let's just go get that stamp. And then I started doing the math, because it takes me about 4 seconds to write for deposit only on the back of that check. In the office supply store, it's 20 minutes one way and 20 minutes to come back. 40 minutes. I'm not going to do the math for you, but I'm telling you it's going to take me a year to recover 4 seconds at a time and get 40 minutes out of it. So I listened to the little voice. It did what it told me to do. And I had an idea that something good might happen if I would just pay attention, answer the questions honestly, and do what the little voice was suggesting that I do. And that little voice sent me on that trip, and I went out to the store and I found the little stamp, $6 and change. Now I'm holding the stamp in my hand and I'm walking toward the checkout line. I'm thinking, nothing really spectacular or good has happened. Yes, I did enjoy the sunshine and the fresh air. Yes, I'm having a better day because I went out for this little stamp. And I passed by this little stand and it says clearance. And I look on the second shelf and I find a set of CDs and it's called The Eighth Habit by Dr. Stephen Covey. And if you don't recognize the name, you may recognize the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Dr. Stephen Covey. I turn the CDs over and on the back, and I'm going to pick this up so I can tell you exactly what it says on the back of the cover. This is the 8th habit. Find your voice and inspire others to find theirs. I was about 2 years into Toastmasters when I recognized that slogan, find your voice, because I had seen it on a brochure that they used to hand out in Toastmasters. And I thought, this is perfect. I had been thinking weeks earlier about how often I'm driving around, spending time listening to the radio and the same songs I've heard for decades and learning nothing new. And I thought, maybe I should get myself some CDs to put in my stereo so I can at least be improving myself as I'm driving around spending time. And here they were, all because the little voice led me through a series of questions to get to the place to buy this stamp so I could find this set of CDs so I could learn the 8th habit. There was another time. This was right around, again, around the same time frame. I was going to a Toastmasters meeting, and I can time things very well. I know exactly how long it takes to get from my house to the Palm Desert Community Center. Well, there's an intersection that I go through, and I have a choice of turning left or going straight. And the light ahead of me to go straight is green, and the left turn arrow is red. And that little voice said, turn left. And I said, well, wait, now come on. There's a green, there's a red left turn arrow, and I've got the green light ahead of me. I'm going straight. Well, just as I was about to go through the intersection, I noticed the red arrow turned to green. And I thought, oh boy. And then I got to the next intersection where I had to make a left turn to get to where I was going. And on the right side, there was a disabled vehicle and cars stacked up behind it. And I did not get to my Toastmasters meeting on time that day. So don't ever ignore what the little voice tells you to do. So you have 2 ways that that little voice will help to guide you. One, he's asking questions. For me, it was a he. That changed later. And the other way is when it tells you exactly what to do. Make sure you pay attention to that. But now that I've explained what that little voice is, I'm hoping that those of you who didn't raise your hand have a little better idea of what that little voice can do for you. And here's the challenge I have for all of you. If you did raise your hand and you know what it's about, I want you to tune your tuner. I want you to be a little better with your tuning and listen to it more often. For those of you who didn't raise your hands, think about when you've had intuition or a gut feeling, or let's call it an inkling. And I want you to start finding how you tune to that channel and see if you can't get more advice from that little voice. That is my story on that little voice, and I hope all of you manage your tuners to the best of your ability to get the guidance you all deserve. Madam President.
That was excellent, Brian. I'd like to start this time with Tom. Did you do your evaluation, Tom?
Sure.
Okay. Round of applause for Tom, our fearless leader.
One of the biggest things that I think you want to accomplish when you're speaking, in almost every case, maybe on the wrong side of it, maybe that is the case, but almost every opportunity you speak with a conference, whether it's at your club, Whether it's to a social gathering, you know, you're talking at a wedding or a funeral or something. But I think one of your goals is almost always to have your audience like you better after you've spoken than when you began speaking. And I didn't know you would do that. And so to bring you closer to your heart, I think it really hit me at the end where you felt for the audience, you paid attention to the audience, you were focused on the audience as a part of your presentation. And you had this warmth at the end. So you brought us into your speech and the listeners. We're more likely to agree with you if we like you, believe it or not. You know, you can be saying all the wrong things. People vote for those kind of people all the time. And they say the wrong things, but they like what there's the way they come across. So that's one of your goals. And I think that's something you accomplished rather well. My greatest suggestion, my greatest suggestion for you though, is to pay attention to the light. Before you come up to speak, you need to look and have someone tell you where you should be standing. Too often, you were back here in the dark and you had things reflecting off of you and someone rather than really being able to see. So you go, okay, before it starts, your speech is being given because you check where should I be, where can I make these points that I want to make, and that was a distraction that I had to keep from writing it over and over. So back up, but in the dark, that was good. Good passion and variety. Sometimes when you talk about that little voice, we have a member of my 1348 that used to talk about his wife, and every time his wife talked to him, he had this squeaky little voice. And it would add humor to the whole speech, and her voice wasn't like that, but it made me. So you might have thought maybe, unless it's a totally serious speech, you might have tried a slightly different effect of your voice in terms of talk about that little voice in your head leading you astray. I suppose sometimes that little voice might lead you astray, though. So we got to be a little careful about that. But you can be heard. Part of the time you're speaking, I have an arrow in the head going way back to the back of the room, and way back of this giant auditorium that holds significantly more than 100. You were able to be understood. Sometimes you could have enunciated better, where there were words were kind of close together, and I had to, because I'm half deaf, but you might want to make sure, because you do have audience members that aren't half deaf, but so you might want to make sure that you actually make sure everyone can hear and understand every word you use, and so a little more enunciation out of it. But interesting topic, and I look forward to hearing you again.
Excellent, Tom. Thank you. I'll do my evaluation. Fellow Toastmasters, honored guests, folks on Zoom, and especially Brian. You are charming and charismatic. Let me stand. You are charming and charismatic, and it comes through in the passion that you gave this speech. Your stories were visual. I could see you driving to Office Depot. I could see you fighting to not want to leave your gloomy office. I could see the gloomy office. And then the little stamp, the pre-inked stamp. And you doing the math, of course. Is this going to save me any time or not? I've done that before, but I think you did the right thing. And then look what you found. And you gave us a book recommendation, which I will now, of course, download on Audible and read. If you were to deliver this speech again, I would suggest focusing on the area of best lighting so you can be seen. And sometimes when you laugh at your own folly, you look down. I would rather see you throw your head back in laughter and then recover than to look down. Because I want to see that smile. I want to see that you're laughing at your own silliness, your own ability to argue with that little voice that you know is always right, and yet you argue. We all do. I do. I argue. Thank you for reminding me not to argue with my little voice. And I look forward to seeing you speak again very soon. Richard, are you ready to come forward with your evaluation of Brian?
I'm ready, Madam Toastmaster. Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and especially Brian. Brian, I loved your speech. I enjoyed that little voice, particularly like the way you asked the audience and you paused. You waited for the audience to respond, and then you looked back over your shoulder at the screen. A lot of people ask a question and they don't take the time to pause. That showed me that you really cared about your audience. I loved your gestures. When you were signing the checks, you showed us signing the checks. When you showed us driving 20 minutes that way and 20 minutes the other way, we could see it. Great job with gestures. A couple things to work on if you were to give this speech again. The biggest thing was the lighting. As you move to your right, you were there, easy to see. But as you move to your left, you got lost again. You got lost like the previous speaker, a shadow over your face. It was very hard to see you. So make sure if you were to do the speech again, practicing so that the lighting works for you. It worked on your right, but not on your left. Also, because you are Zooming, you need to be very conscientious of pronunciation. I had a little bit difficulty at first with the TLV. Really make sure you enunciate those letters very carefully, as well as that little voice. I wasn't sure at the beginning what it was, but I was able to figure out. So really exaggerate the enunciation, because you're speaking, you have an audience there, but you also have the audience on the internet. Finally, come back to your question. I thought it was a great question. You paused. Maybe throw it back to the audience again. You asked us at the beginning about that little voice. Maybe come back to the next time. What are you going to do, fellow Toastmasters, the next time you hear that little voice? I enjoyed your speech. I enjoyed your gestures. That was a great speech with gestures. You surely showed us with the gestures. And I hope to have the opportunity to hear you again. Madam Toastmaster.
Richard, I hope I get to compete against you in a contest one day. That's going to be a throwdown. You're fantastic. Great observation about asking again at the end and observing those wonderful gestures, which I saw but didn't see. I saw but I missed. Nicely done. Thank you, Richard. David, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready to go.
Okay, fantastic. Let's have it.
I thank you, Madam Toastmaster. Fellow Toastmasters, in particular, Brian. Brian, interesting story and interesting way you presented it of how being the single person in this whole story, along with your little voice. I thought you brought up some interesting, openings with bringing the audience into it. Say, hey, do you talk your little voice, or you know about the little voice? So your interaction with the audience was kind of nice in the very beginning and how you presented it. Things I really enjoy about your presentation, obviously you have a good voice, you project yourself well. The way you gesture is really fun to watch because it's so natural. Oftentimes you'll see speakers who do their presentations, but you can almost see a mechanicalness in it when they try to match their gestures with their words. Yours are flowing smoothly. When you speak, you gesture with your hands as if you were speaking with your hands. So I felt that's one of the things I really liked about your presentation. You have a relaxed way of speaking to people. A couple items I want to bring to your attention, though, when I watch you, especially in Zoom. I know that you're live in the audience, so you're not really aware of the lighting, but that's something you'll need to take into consideration if you're ever in a hybrid meeting in a sense. But that just comes with understanding what's available to you. But one of the things I noticed is that you move across the stage. There's no real direct motion to it. It's almost like just a pace, but also you start speaking the same time you're walking sideways. So I'm just looking at the side of a face, and I think that's the reason some of the people might have difficulty hearing your voice, because you're projecting now to one side of the stage or the other. And at times you were actually looking down as you were speaking. So there's points where you weren't really facing your audience to get your word out. And I think it's important whenever you do speak to project yourself to the audience. Moving on the stage is fine, but speaking at the same time, but not looking at your audience kind of takes away from your power of the speech itself. The idea that you reach down for your phone to get the reference of what you wanted to say, it's understandable. Perhaps you could wear a coat or have somewhere you have it more on your body so you wouldn't have to reach down to it. But when you do have to grab something that you want to reference, you want to maybe explain that this is important. I want to make sure I get it right. So I'm going to reference it from my phone or my notes so that you'll have exactly what I want you to hear. So I think those are things that you might want to look at as far as if you're going to get reaching for something, have it available, a prop of some sort, so you're not having to bend down and lose your audiences face to face, especially when you're on a Zoom meeting where we're looking at you go down and we kind of lose you out of the picture and you come back up. But overall, great story, very natural presentation, the way you do it, almost like you're talking to a friend that you've known for years and you're just sharing that story with them. Congratulations on a great speech, Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, David. Thank you, David. You gave a couple of suggestions that I didn't notice. Walking while talking sideways, if you're aiming this way, if you're going to walk, at least turn your face this way so that the projection is still this way. And getting the lighting right here is it seems to all be aimed over here. Also, I loved the wording you use for excusing yourself for using notes or referring to a phone. I want to get it just right. That's a good one. I feel like I really came away learning something tonight, and I didn't think I was going to learn much from my own presentation. Thank you very much for that. Those are our examples and our evaluations. And there's one thing I'd like to share. Can I borrow my notebook? I want to get this right. For when you're actually evaluating, especially if you're in a contest. Let me give you these, Suzanne. I do something that looks like a cross. I draw a line across and a line down the middle, and it looks like a giant plus sign. And I write pros over here and SUGG over here for suggestions and what was done well. And I write keywords. Let me borrow that back. I wrote for Morris, I wrote, you look sharp. I wrote turning the pages. I wrote so passionate. And on the other side, for the suggestions, I said, things in your pocket, exclamation mark. Start with the story. So just a couple of little things to remind myself of what I'm going to say and in what order. And when I was starting out, I used to actually, at the beginning of a contest, I would write the words, if you were to deliver this speech again, comma, I'd like to see ... So that when I transitioned from the pros to the suggestions, using my little cross, I had a transition, something to say that sounded gentle and loving and nice, because you can tell when an evaluation is full of love. And when it's given with love, it's taken with love. And we all improve when we feel loved. I wanted to share this with you. I got this from John Reese. Thank you, John, wherever you might be. I was sitting with him once when he was in a contest, and he showed me how he did this, and I fell in love with it. I've done it, and I've taught it to anyone I've mentored ever since. It's a great way to not have to write paragraphs. You know what you want to say about that. You just need to remember one or two keywords. And I thought I would share this method with you as a parting shot. Are there any other questions? Yes, Brian.
I noticed the color coding on the pages. Turn it over.
Yes,
So that is like one long list. If you stack it end to end, top to bottom, the colors go together, right?
that is correct. This is a giant spreadsheet made with Excel, and you can tape them up 1, 2, 3 so that you can see, because the green is organization, and then it subcategorizes thesis, preview, main points, transitions, closing, conclusion, organizational qualities. So yes, these are a straight up and down, although they are on separate sheets. When you print them, if you decide to put them on your wall or go to Office Depot and have them laminated, make sure they're on top of each other so they make the most sense. Any other questions? Anybody? No?
One isn't Dominique great? No.
Thank you, Marcia. Well, let me think. Yes, I am. Thank you. It's been my absolute pleasure to share my passion of evaluations tonight. I look forward to doing it again some other time, because you can't get better unless you practice. And practicing evaluations, even getting evaluated by the general evaluator, evaluate the evaluation. Thank God it doesn't go on forever, and then evaluate that and evaluate that. But knowing things you might have missed or done well as an evaluator is always one of my favorite parts, even though it's not technically in the actual, this is what you're supposed to do as a general evaluator. In the clubs I've been in our culture, we evaluate the evaluator. And I love that, because how am I going to get better as an evaluator if I never get an evaluation myself as a speaker? Judy, what do you got?
My question is that you wrote here on your evaluation sheet, may use with permission. So can you elaborate on that?
Yes, please use this sheet and send me an email and tell me, this is me requesting permission. And that'll be good enough. I'd like to just know who's using it and when. It boosts my ego, makes me feel better, and lets me know how many people in District 12 are getting the benefit of this sheet. I put my phone number and my email address. Please feel free to just give me a heads up. You don't really need to. I'm giving everybody permission, but it would be kind of neat to know that you were using it, just for my own benefit. Sound good?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, good. My pleasure. Okay, I think that about wraps it up. This has been a fun night. I'm going to hand it back to you, Tom, and I'm going to give you this little doodad.